Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? It's been a wild week for Virginia Tech football as the question marks at quarterback continue ahead of the Hokies' trip to Huntington, West Virginia to take on Marshall. Do we have a serious problem if Kyron Drones were to go down on Saturday? Is this a must-win for Virginia Tech in order to turn around the 2023 season? Well, we'll discuss all that and more. It's episode 313 of the Tech Sideline podcast coming up right now. We record on Thursday, September 21st, 2023, from our high-tech studios at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and please share the podcast with a pal. On set today, a little bit different. Will Stewart back in the fourth chair, founder and general manager, by high demand, might I add. Everybody wanted Mr. Stewart back. He got emails and everything, so good to have you back on. The boss man is back. Andy Bitter across the way, senior staff writer, and of course, Chris Coleman on set as well. Behind the scenes, Jay Brizzy, Jack Brizendine is our producer. Fellas, let's get right into it. Kind of a drama-full week for Virginia Tech football. Not your typical game week. We'll start out with the news. Pop Watson suspended. He is your third-string quarterback. Now Dylan Whitkey moves into that situation, and when you got your top dog injured, this is troublesome. Yeah,
you say third string, and Pop was effectively the backup last week because I don't think there was any chance Grant Wells was going to play last week, and I don't think there's a good chance he plays this week just based on how he's moving around the other day. So you've got Kyron Drones, your probable starter. Yeah, Grant Wells probably can't go. Pop Watson suspended. Dylan Whitkey sounds like the next guy. And Brent Pry said that he was neck and neck with Pop Watson coming out of the summer, but they went a different direction. They went with Pop Watson, and now he's not there. So essentially, what was your fourth string guy is now your backup. Behind him, Ben Locklear, walk-on quarterback. The Hokies better hope Kyron Drones can stay healthy in this game because it gets pretty dicey after that.
Yeah, it really does. And from everything I hear about Wells, it's extremely unlikely that he plays football or is able to play football until October. Everything I've understood. So Pop Watson is your second string or was your second string quarterback for at least the rest of this month. And now he's not. So this is not a one game thing. Well, hopefully it's a one-game thing with Pop. Now, it's an indefinite suspension, so that means it could end at any point. It could end next week, or they could choose to continue it. We don't know the extent of the infractions and things like that. But, yeah, it's a big deal when you're less than a month into the season and you've lost two of your top three quarterbacks for various reasons. I mean, that's obviously a cause for concern.
Now, we've heard it's what, a curfew thing?
Yes.
With
violation
Pop?
Of team rules.
It's a little bit odd, though, that, they don't let him practice. Normally for something minor like that, you bump them down to scout team and you just make them work really hard to earn their spot back or whatever. So it's a little bit odd that he's at home on the couch.
It makes me wonder if it maybe a little bit more involved in this. We don't know the full story. They didn't do him any favors by coming out and saying he's suspended indefinitely. It's well, that's the language you use when it's something egregious. And
yes,
you want to take a careful stance when there's legal stuff involved. That does not seem like the case. With Pop, I've checked the courts thing. There's nothing on there with that. So maybe they Breon Murray last year had a traffic ticket thing where he ended up having to go to court, or they put a warrant out for him or whatever, and he ended up getting a 1-game suspension. I think Pry said it was a 1-game suspension at the time. I'd have to go back and check. I feel like they maybe could have done that in this situation, or maybe they're trying to send a message one way or another. But I don't feel like this is. He's done something terribly wrong, and we don't know when he'll be back. I think it'll be a short-term thing that he'll be back in the fold.
Yeah, I think it depends on the extent, how much did you violate curfew by, and what was the reason? If he walked to 7-Eleven because he wanted a Gatorade, and they did room checks while he happened to be gone, that's kind of bad luck, and it's not a huge deal anyway. But if you were missed curfew by 4 hours or something like that, and you were up to no good or something like that, then maybe it
Define no good, Chris.
yeah, I
No,
don't know. I'm just
kidding.
saying that maybe that requires a little more drastic measure. But I don't know. Hopefully, it doesn't last very long.
Well, he's lucky this wasn't a bowl trip. He would have had to take a bus ride back. That was the old Beamer punishment for.
Yeah.
Who was the kicker who got busted twice for that?
2 years in a row.
Yeah. I forget his name. He was going to end up being the starter at that Sugar Bowl.
I used to
and
go to-
did not play because,
Yeah.
and then they had the backup come in and end up missing the kick in the overtime.
Keith Short used to go to our gym, and he was the first Virginia Tech player to get sent home from a bus. It was when he was a true freshman in the Sugar Bowl in 1995. And so he had to bus back to Blacksburg days before the internet, and then had to have a come to Jesus meeting with Frank Beamer when
Curfew.
afterwards.
Take the curfew seriously. That's the lesson here.
I hate to take it to this, but it's part of our job as journalists to talk about it. First thing I'm thinking in my head is you got this guy that was promising coming in. They clearly liked him. The fan base enjoyed him as well. One of your bigger gets of that freshman class this season. And first thing that goes in my head, I was like, man, this kid's gonna transfer. When you this era of college football nowadays, you almost have to baby your stars in a way. Now, I'm not saying anything about Pop's character. Who knows? This could be a situation where he's like, I gotta make up for this, work my tail off, things like that. But in this era of college football, often you see a star player like that get suspended or something, and his initial reaction is, I'm out.
That's why you have to be very careful who you recruit and which schools you recruit from. I think that's extremely important. It's always been important in recruiting, but these days, like you said, with all that other stuff, I think that becomes more important than usual. And I know everybody wants recruiting class rankings and things like that, but just don't think that's as important these days because of all the stuff that you just brought up. I will say Pop Watson grew up the son of a coach. This is very unlike, and a successful coach too. So this is very unlikely to cause a rift, in my opinion. In fact, he's already issued a public apology on social media and things like that this morning. So I don't think it's going to turn out to be a big deal.
Yeah, I was just going to mention he tweeted an apology to everybody, so it seems like he's taken this in stride. It's interesting. We talked. This has been the top 5 minutes of the show. This might not even matter if
Right.
Kyron Drones plays. Like we're all talking about something
Right.
under the water here, quarterback wise. It could be a very big factor if Drones has to come out of the game, but it also could be nothing on Saturday just based on Drones is the starter, and if he plays the whole game, then this is much ado about nothing in the end.
Will's got something for us from the fourth chair.
First of all, the kicker in 2011 who was absent for that Sugar Bowl was Cody Journell.
Well,
No, there was
Cody,
another one. It was
Cody got arrested before the Sugar Bowl, and that's why he did not play in that.
Justin
There was-
Meyer, maybe?
No, Justin Meyer kicked in that game. There was another kicker
was
who was
another.
going to be the field goal kicker in that game who missed curfew and got sent home, and he had missed it previously, I believe, in an Orange Bowl.
He was part of the Dennis Rodman party.
And I can't remember what his name was, but man, to get double busted and have to go home from Miami and go home from New Orleans, like talk about two towns where there's some distractions out there where you're missing curfew.
with Dennis Rodman. You're a New Year's
Yeah.
party with Dennis Rodman. By the way, I think the only person who was at that party who didn't get sent home was David Wilson. Imagine that.
Yeah, there's sliding scale of justice on that whole thing. I'm gonna say, if you're gonna miss curfew at a bowl game, like do it in Miami and do it in New Orleans and do it up. Like,
Do it at
if-
Dennis Rodman's party.
If you're gonna face a bus ride home, like man, that's a good time to do it. It's less fun if you're in like Shreveport or El Paso or something like
I've
that.
seen pictures from the after party, so to speak, and it's like 8 a.m. the next morning, and Rodman is still in the hotel bar smoking a cigar.
That's just an average weekday night for Dennis
Correct.
Rodman.
It was
That's insane.
It's really hard to control a bunch of college kids when they're around something. Like
What
that.
was Dennis Rodman doing partying with Virginia Tech? How does that?
No, he was just happened to be staying at the same hotel.
Okay.
He was
There's
in
no
Miami
reason
New
for
Year's.
partying when it comes to Dennis Rodman.
No,
That's
no
just
reason
the
at all.
Dennis Rodman experience.
Yes.
Absolutely. Did you guys watch The Last Dance? They got a lot into
Oh
it.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Great doc. Great doc. Well, as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Check out their new Checking with Perks account that comes with cell phone protection, roadside assistance, fuel savings, deals and discounts, and more. Visit firstbank.com to learn about this great new account for students. Well, another thing that stood out to me in the media conversations this week is, of course, Ollie Jennings is still out, but besides that, and maybe Grant Wells, it seems like we're getting some guys back here, getting a little bit healthier. Some guys that were banged up, didn't play last week, could go this week.
I hope so. Jalen Lane, yesterday?
Jalen Lane, I mean, I thought he was going to go last week based on pregame, and then they thought that something wasn't right. He was out there again. It's going to come down to how's he feel on Saturday. And, again, hamstrings, they can be crazy. One day they feel great, one day they don't feel great. I think, I'm still looking at those safety positions. Jalen Stroman sort of working his way back. Even yesterday, Jalen Jones, Mose Phillips were the first team guys out there when they did this skeleton drill that the media saw. So probably not all the way back, or they're still kind of bringing him back slowly. Nasir Peoples is out this week. He's not been practicing, and I feel like of all the injuries they had, I know Ali gets the headlines because he was the playmaker and the guy who scored 2 touchdowns in the opener. I feel like they've really been missing Nasir in that defensive secondary because he's played so many games. He's such a heady player. He's in the right spot all the time. You look at some of the run stopping issues that they've had with being in the right lane, the right gap, or holding the edge. I feel like those are issues that if you had Nasir out there, they wouldn't be as glaring as they've been the last couple weeks. So they will not have him this week. That's something they gotta worry about. But I think getting Jalen Stroman back and not having to start 2 really young guys like that at safety would be huge.
Seems like Alan Tisdale's going to be back. He was practicing.
He was working with the first team Mike in the 7-on-7 that we saw. So, yeah, I would imagine the team would. Okay. It would be. I think it's going to be a rotation between him and Keller, but, they were primed to start him against Rutgers. I would imagine he would get the start here.
They were rotating at Mike a lot, like no matter who was starting. Like Tisdale was out last week, but they still rotated in the third string guy, which is McDonald, rather than giving Keller all the reps. And they could have given Keller all the reps because Rutgers only had the ball for 50 snaps. And Tech had a huge advantage in time of possession. So fatigue was not an issue for the defense. So I think they're just not. I don't think they're particularly confident in any player there. Like even in the game where they started Tisdale, he still only played about 60% of the snaps, and Keller played 40%. So I just think they're trying to play everybody in the hopes that one of them finally steps up and really starts proving that they're a really good run stopper. That hasn't happened yet. Kind of doesn't seem likely it's going to at this point. Hopefully somebody just establishes themselves that is a more consistent guy than the others.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into our Marshall preview here a little bit. You're looking at a team that has won a lot of football games as of late, particularly in the last 10 years, though Virginia Tech is an 11-2 all-time against the Marshall Thundering Herd. Massive weekend, though, in Huntington, arguably one of the biggest in their athletic department's recent history, Chris.
It's the first time since 2018 they've hosted a Power 5 school. It's the first time since at least 2018 that they've had a home weekend game televised by one of the major networks. And I didn't go past 2018 to check, so it's probably even further than that. They're striping their stadium, green, white, all the way around. Their soccer team's ranked number 2 in the country, and they play number 6 UCF later that day. It's a massive sports weekend on campus. This is their biggest home game they've had in quite a while, so the fan base is going to be very up for this one.
So you're just looking at the numbers here. Dating back to 2013, 10-4 that year. 2014, 13-1. 2015, 10-3. Had a slip up in 2016, went 3-9. Then you go 8-5, 9-4, 8-5, 7-3, 7-6, 9-4, and right now Marshall is 2-0. No stranger to winning football games.
What is that? Something like, what was the total?
86-44 in the last 10 years.
This was a winning program. It's a consistently winning program over the last decade. They've had good coaches in there. They continue to hire good coordinators. It seems like, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They've had 3 different defensive coordinators since, I think, 2019, yet they keep putting good defenses on the field. Over the last 3 years combined, I think if you average up like the S&P Plus ratings or the FEI ratings or something like that, on average, they have the best non-Power 5 defense in the country over the last 3 years. They do things extremely well on that side of the ball. That they just win. It's a winning program. I mean, for as long as I can remember, Marshall has had a winning program. There are a few slip-ups here and there, but I mean, I even remember back like when I was in high school and they had, who was their quarterback? Chad Pennington.
Pennington DeMoss.
Yeah, exactly. And that was when they were an FCS team or 1AA team back then. And then they made the jump, and then they had Byron Leftwich, and they were still very good under Byron Leftwich. So historically, this is a winning program, and it's a winning program that's going to be playing their biggest game in quite a while. So Virginia Tech's going to have to match their intensity.
Yeah, they've had some good coaches there too. Bob Pruitt for the longest time was an excellent coach there. Kind of surprised they got rid of Doc Holliday.
Yeah.
I thought he had such a great run there. I know they fell off that one season where they had a really good start, and then they ended up changing it. But Charles Huff, I think, was a hire that they made that a lot of people were very high on. And, he coached with Brent Pry and James Franklin at Penn State for a couple years there, then went down to the SEC, was in that Saban tree, coached at Alabama before he got this Marshall job. And you see him already, some of those Sabanisms that he had down there. Somebody mentioned what the line was on Twitter earlier in the week, and he quote tweeted and said, "rat poison," which is a Nick Saban phrase for, not listening to the media. He always says all the hype that you hear is rat poison because it gets in the players' heads, and all of a sudden they think that they're better than that. So very interesting coaching matchup here with Charles Huff going against Brent Pry, two former James Franklin acolytes there.
Well, it's arguably the third week in a row that Virginia Tech's playing a pretty stingy defense. Chris, how do you think this Marshall defense compares to the one Tech saw against Rutgers and then Purdue as well?
I don't think they're as athletic as the Rutgers defense, nor are they as big as the Purdue defense, but they've got a large number of redshirt seniors, and redshirt juniors, and a couple of these redshirt seniors are like sixth-year players. Very, very experienced on that side of the ball. They start a redshirt sophomore at one of their defensive back positions. I think he's a safety. Everybody else in the starting defense is either a redshirt junior or older. So they are veterans on that side of the ball, and they're veterans of that have played at a very high level. Their defensive ends in particular are good, but they're solid across the board. They're not going to wow you with athleticism or anything like that, but they're exceptionally well coached, very experienced football players. They do have a little bit of a weakness when it comes to the quarterback rushing the football against them. Virginia Tech's not the only team in the country to have that problem.
Spider-Man meme of people pointing at each other there.
Exactly. That's exactly what this game kind of is. But at the same time, they've had a bye week, whatever issues. They're at the point where they didn't play as well as they're capable of, I think, in their first 2 weeks. Then they had a bye week, and that's what coaches like. Coaches probably like to have a bye week. I guess it can vary depending on your team's strengths and weaknesses, but when you get that bye week after a couple weeks and it's obvious what your weaknesses are, you can really focus on those. So for them, it's been inconsistent running game on offense, although when it has worked, it's been very explosive. And defensively, it's been stopping the quarterback. So I'm guessing over the last week when they had their bye, that was there were big focuses for Charles Huff and his staff.
Yeah, Brent Pry, we asked him yesterday about this defense. Is that very fast on the back end. So, that'll be a challenge. Athletically, just quickness that they have on the other side. I'll be curious. Maybe not as much size as what they went up against Rutgers, and Tech moved the ball a little bit against the Scarlet Knights last week. Not always the most traditional way on the ground game, but they did find ways to move, and Kyron Drone's running the ball, so that's something to look out for this week.
You guys see anybody on this defense for Marshall that could really stand out and give Virginia Tech fits?
I mean, they've got a couple of guys. I believe it was it Owen Porter, who was a first-team All-Conference player last year.
Yes.
And one of their linebackers as well. Was it Brown or Neal?
That was Abraham.
Abraham. Oh, Abraham, their cornerback. That's right. Yeah, he's a very, very good player. So they have good players at every level of the defense. I don't think they're like physically dominant across the board or anything like that. I just think they're an older group that's extremely well coached with a winning mentality. Like they expect to win every week. Last week against East Carolina was a perfect example. They were struggling in that game. They were losing 13-10 at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and then bam, they hadn't played well at all, and they just turned it up a notch and then won 31-13. Against an East Carolina team that is 0-3, but they've played a very tough schedule so far, and they went 8-5 last year. So I just think this is a team that's used to winning. That's what scares me more than anything about this game is just Virginia Tech has kind of gotten used to losing, and they're playing a team that has developed over the last decade a strong winning mentality.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody necessarily stands out in this defense, but I did want to point out the name Tyquays Legs, defensive tackle, 6'2", 300. It's just a great name. Leggs. The extra G is for
There are
greatness.
a handful of good names.
I will have to go with number 70, Jalen Slappy. Offensive
good one.
lineman. It's a good one.
That's a good West Virginia name. I feel
It
like.
is. Like, he's not listed in their starting lineup. I have no idea if he's going to play or not. Probably not, redshirt freshman, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. Jalen Slappy, number 70.
It's always fun to go through the other roster and just find the best. I bet you when other teams did that back in the day, and they're like, Divine Diablo, that's the greatest name I've ever heard of.
That's true. He sacked Josh Allen the other day for the Raiders.
Did he really?
Yeah, he
There you
did. Came right through on a blitz, like untouched, and crushed Josh Allen pretty good, actually.
This is what other people do when they see the Tech Sideline roster and they go, Giovanni Heater. That is an
That is
elite
a name.
baseball name there. That's awesome.
This isn't even a real podcast. Those dudes are fake with a name like that.
I did it all wrong. I played lacrosse. Should have been a baseball pitcher. I'm left-handed, too.
That's
Oh, yeah,
good.
you-
That's
you'd
good.
be in the majors
you
right
really
now.
screwed it up.
You
I
could have
really
a
did.
20-year career. A loogie.
Oh, well. Hopefully we'll talk about baseball, instead as a career. But Clint Trickett, an inexperienced offensive coordinator, very similar to, like, you go back to that Spider-Man meme.
Yeah.
You got Tyler Bowen for Virginia Tech, who you could label as inexperienced for sure. But what do they bring to the table on offense?
I think they have a lot of talent at running back. All right, so they have two things on offense that will scare the heck out of Tech fans. They have a 1,400-yard rusher from a couple years ago. He missed last season with an injury, and then his backup, Kalon LeBourne, rushed for 1,500 yards.
Right.
But
Churning out yards despite who's back there.
yeah, LeBourne's gone, but Rasheen Ali is the running back. He's back, 1,400 yards, and also caught like 45 passes 2 years ago. He's a very good all-around back. It was interesting. I put his highlights in our game preview, and like, there's Grant Wells on every play, handing him the ball or throwing it to him. And they were doing stuff like rolling Wells out. I don't want to get into that, though. But anyway, and then you've got a mobile quarterback in Cam Flancher, a mobile quarterback who is not a very good passer. So in a way, this is a very similar matchup to last week. I don't think this offensive line they're big like the Rutgers line. 329, 335, 306, 305, 319 from left to right. I don't think they're as physically strong as the Rutgers line. I do think Ali is a more dynamic back than the one Tech saw last week, which is kind of scary. The Marshall offense, though, they have not played well so far. Obviously, they struggle in the passing game. But in the start of the fourth quarter of that East Carolina game, Ali only had, I think it was 15 carries for 6 yards. And he ended up with 18 carries for 85 yards. So his last few carries were pretty dynamic. That's what he's capable of. But if all you have to do is watch the film. This guy is projected anywhere from a 4th to 6th round pick. He's a very, very good player and quite possibly the best running back Virginia Tech will face all season. They have not played their best football the first 2 weeks, so he and Fancher are probably going to be looking at the film of that Virginia Tech rush defense and saying, well, we've got a great chance to get things on track this year. I'm not a big believer in Clint Trickett so far as offensive coordinator. He seems to be more pass-heavy than he should, considering their struggles at quarterback and wide receiver. He's very inexperienced. This is going to be the rare case where Chris Marv is not outmatched from an experience standpoint. Because he's got pretty much just about the same amount of experience as Trickett as a coordinator. So that should not be an issue this week.
Yeah, I think I look at Marshall's offense and very similar to Rutgers, just style-wise, or how they should be style-wise in terms of running the ball a lot. So I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing for Virginia Tech, because Virginia Tech saw the entire tape against Rutgers. They know where they need to improve in certain areas, and if it's a similar challenge, maybe that's a motivator, like, okay, another shot to go out there and be able to stop the run like they didn't last week.
Season opener for the Thundering Herd. They play the University of Albany at home and struggle a little bit. They won that ball game still. They're 2-0, but 21-17 was the final score. Again, it's the first game of the year. How much stake do you put in the fact that Marshall did not look very good against the Great Danes?
Not so much in that game per se. You want to try to combine both games together, and they didn't play particularly well until the last 9 or 10 minutes against East Carolina. At least they didn't play well offensively. They played well defensively for the most part. I don't think they're just not firing on all cylinders yet. They are 2-0, but they're not playing at the level that they played at last year, in my opinion. Not that they're not capable, because they've got quite a large number of those players back, and they're a very experienced team. And we know Rasheen Ali can dominate football games because he's done. He was a Football Writers freshman All-American 2 years ago. I mean, this guy had national accolades, and a lot of people thought he would be gone for Marshall after that year and try his hand at another level, but here he is, still there. I don't think they have great wide receiver talent. Here's where Virginia Tech can get the advantage in this game. They allowed 118 rushing yards to East Carolina's quarterback last week, and the week before that, they allowed a 54-yard touchdown run to the Albany quarterback. And most of their stuff that they've allowed is on scrambles and draws, per se. I originally figured, read option, figure that out this week, let's roll. But when you go back and look at those games, it's nearly all quarterback up the middle design stuff or scrambles. Quite a bit of scrambling, to be honest with you. So they've shown the ability to get to the quarterback, but they haven't been able to bring him down. So that's another thing they've probably been working on the offseason, is guys keeping their rush lanes I said the off-season, I think I meant off-week. But you keep your rush lanes. But this is a game where Kyron Drones, if Marshall continues to play a little bit undisciplined on defense like that, he has certainly got the athleticism to take advantage of it. The East Carolina quarterback reminded me a bit of Drones from a size standpoint and everything. Except I don't think he's as good throwing the ball as Drones is. So I think Drones will be the biggest challenge for the Marshall defense so far this year.
Do you think Virginia Tech really focuses on trying to run the football this week, or you think they, kind of go 50-50? Or
I think you've got to be balanced. I think, yes, you want to run the football. And when you look at the amount of yardage their defense has given up to quarterbacks this year, I think you have to commit yourself to Kyron Drones running that ball between 10 and 20 times in this game. He had 22 carries against Rutgers. And so that was a big part of the game plan then. You got to factor in, some of those are going to be scrambles and things like that. Yeah, you've got to be balanced. I don't think you can say, okay, Drones originally did not win the starting job because he wasn't as advanced in the passing game. That's why he didn't win the starting job. So I don't think you want to roll up there for a road game without your top receiver, maybe without your number 2 receiver, with your backup quarterback whose strength is running, and say, we're going to throw it 40 times this week. So I would definitely expect a balanced offense, but they want to try to get the running game going. They'll run it more than they throw it, I'm sure, unless they're just behind by a couple scores most of the game.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at your team's weapons. You don't have Ollie Jennings, Jalen Lane. We'll see. Bashal Tutin's the best offensive weapon they have right now. Got to get him involved, and whether that's screens or swing passes in the passing game. The run game is where he can really stand out, and if you get things going there. And, you pointed out last week, Chris, he ran for 4.1 yards a carry. It wasn't a ton of carries, but, he got a little bit going there, a little bit better than last week. Maybe Brody Meadows gets some more time at guard. He looked pretty good last week against Rutgers. There are just some signs there that were encouraging last week that, that is a big part of this offense. Got to get that going. And I think that does open up things in the passing game if they can, make defenses respect that.
It's a good point about Meadows. And I wrote about him yesterday. He had 27 or 28 snaps, I believe, against Rutgers last week. Previously, he had been getting his snaps at right guard, but he got him at right guard and left guard this time around. And I really think they're trying to get some more size in there, because Tech doesn't have the biggest offensive line in the world. In fact, they've got 2 guys sub 300 pounds right next to each other, which at left guard and center, the Moore brothers, and you just don't see that too often in college these days. Bob Schick he was considered the weak spot coming into the season for the offensive line, but amongst the starters, he's actually been the high grader through 3 games. And if you want to get more size, like it wouldn't shock me if you saw Meadows more at left guard in this game, just to get a little more size in there. He's the perfect example of why you should pay very little attention to the depth chart. He's played, I believe, 50 to 60 snaps this year, and not one of them has come at the position he's listed at on the depth chart, which is left tackle.
Well, I thought it was weird that they even mentioned him at left tackle on the depth chart, because all his work he got in the preseason was a guard.
Right.
So, I know he's a swing guy and he can play both spots, but you listen to what Pry says about him. some lesser liabilities when he's on the inside that you don't worry about when he's on the outside. So if I think there's a way to get him in the lineup and get him going, get more snaps, it's definitely going to be on the interior.
Well, not every week that we bring up the special teams, but I think it's definitely relevant this week. Neither team very strong on that side when it comes to the kicking game. You got John Love for Virginia Tech. He is 4 for 5, 7 for 7 on extra points. But that miss against Rutgers was honestly really, really big when you look at how the game ended up shaking out. And if that field goal goes in, then that 2-point conversion could have tied the game. And, it's a 36-yarder. Just feels like that's a spot where you need points. On the other side for Marshall, this is a team that really has a question mark at the kicking spot. Last year, as a true freshman, Verhoff went 13 of 20. They played a different guy against their previous opponent in ECU this past week. They've had a handful of missed field goals, a pair of extra points missed last year as well. Just not a strong suit for either team right now.
They had a field goal blocked as well this year in the first game, I believe it was. Their punt, they don't get a lot of yardage on their punts. They're not great in punt coverage. Based on last year, this year's such a limited sample size that it's really hard to judge. But if you look at their most recent special teams rankings, and I think special teams is the most difficult part of the game to rank from an advanced metrics standpoint, but they've ranked outside the top 100 in special teams play each of the last 3 years. I don't think they have, and generally that's a sign of not having great depth in your program. And so I think that's an advantage. That's something. If Virginia Tech wants to pull off a road win against a team that's playing their biggest home game in years, maybe even a decade, and I think you've got to go in there and find a way to not only win the field position battle, but make a big play on special teams. If you can do that, then I think that gives Virginia Tech a strong chance to go in there and pull off the upset.
Yeah, and Tucker Holloway's been knocking on the door all year. I mean, he had the big punt return at the end of the ODU game, had a nice one against Rutgers that really got them going. I think that was third quarter, and then that set up the touchdown at the start of the fourth quarter.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, they've got a playmaker there. And even if Lane can't be that guy because maybe they're taking it slower with him, Holloway, who missed time in August and now is back, is that guy. So, I think if Tech is going to win this game, need to make a play there, because you look at it felt like they were behind the field position battle against Rutgers the entire game. That was not the case against ODU. It was a big advantage in that game that they had. Obviously the result was positive for them. And then on kicking, got to make the kicks. I think there's a psychological aspect to that is just really deflating. I mean, you think about, Tech struggled early on, didn't really get going, finally gets down there. You haven't scored a point offensively all year. You're in field goal position at the end of a drive, and to come up empty after that, I just feel like that's very deflating. And, you're already in a hole, aren't coming back, didn't get a great start in any of these games. Just need to come away with points there. And, 30, how far did you say it was? 30?
36.
36. That's a range you got to make. I mean, if it's 40 plus, then college kickers, you're starting to get a little bit more iffy. But, 36, I think you got to make that. And, if they can get points early, I think that would help in this game, because, they have not started any of these games all that well.
So they haven't scored in the first quarter, right?
Not offensively. Right. They have a special teams 2 points off the safety on the bad snap.
So they haven't played well offensively in the first quarter, and they haven't played well in the fourth quarter really on either side.
It's like, the sandwich, the middle quarters, they've played
particularly the third.
Right.
Well, at least against Rutgers.
Purdue was the second.
Yeah, Purdue was the second. Rutgers was the third. ODU was the third, I think, when they scored the biggest chunk.
Yeah, but typically they play 4 quarters in college football games.
Correct.
So got to start well, finish well. That would probably help their chances a little bit.
Right. Listen, we're 1-2. We got to find the positive somewhere here, right? Last question for you guys before we're going to head to Will, and we're going to play a little bit of a game here. We talked about it on Monday, but it's worth bringing up again in case anybody didn't listen. How big is this game? I mean, how much of a must-win is this ball game to really flip the season around?
It depends on your goal, I think. If your goal is to make a bowl, which I think we kind of established in the preseason that's really what you want to shoot for. When over 80 teams out of 130 in college football are going to make a bowl, you probably need to be one of those teams.
And you just got to win half.
And I think the team would tell you the same thing. I think that they would have thought 6 wins is achievable this year. if that's still your goal, yeah, you need to win this game. You can't start off 1-3 in non-conference play, and then you still got Florida State. You got Syracuse, who looks good, who went on the road and smacked Purdue around last week. You've got a well-coached NC State team. You've got a well-coached Wake Forest team. A bunch of teams on the schedule that can obviously beat you. So you can't afford to start off 1-3 then.
Yeah, I think you look at the way the ACC schedule starts. You don't want to be 1-3 going into that. I know Pittsburgh has not been all that this year. That's just a matchup that has given Tech trouble in recent years. A physicality that I don't know if this team can bring to the field for the Hokies necessarily. And then Florida State after that, nobody wants to play Florida State. Not only that, Florida State being rested after an off week after they play Clemson this week. So you don't want to be 1-3 going into that. Got to at least get back to level. I said it before, I don't like calling stuff must win, but I feel like this is trending on that territory, that this would be very, very nice to win this to get back to 500.
I also think from a mental standpoint, at some point you've got to flip the script and start winning some games, because you hear coaches and players all the time say, trust the process, trust the process. It's the probably most overused phrase in sports. What nobody ever talks about is when do they stop trusting the process, because there comes a point where you lose so many games and you're like, okay, this isn't working. Right? And you don't want it to reach that point, because once it reaches that point, then it's definitely not going to work. Right? So Virginia Tech is, 3-8 last year. And so they're 4-10 over their last 14 games. You lose this one, you're 4-11, and you've lost 9 straight games against Power 5 teams. At some point, you have to put together a little bit of a run, like not just win a one-off game, but go out there and win like 2 out of 3. Or something like that. Start a trend that shows that you're going in the right direction. But another loss, like you get closer and closer to reaching that breaking point, so to speak. And I don't know when that breaking point is. I just know it would be one game closer. So I think from a psyche standpoint, not only for the fans, of course, but for the players especially, that you want them to believe in what they're doing.
There's only so long you can play the trust the process. I mean, you get 1 year as a mulligan, I think, as a new coach, especially if you're taking over a rebuilding program. After that, you got to start to see some results. Otherwise, you just hear, we're closer, we're closer, we're closer. It's like, okay, are you, or are you Jeff Collins? Are you a 3-win coach every year? And eventually Georgia Tech was like, we're sick of this. Yeah. Let's bring somebody else in. And somebody else comes in and motivates them right away, and they're not a 3-team. It was the same team, and they ended up getting close to a bowl game, if not to a bowl. I forget what the final record was, but they played really great down the stretch. So, you get a little bit of leeway early on, but that you're losing that over time as things progress here.
I'll say injuries definitely have not helped the Hokies. Obviously, we know that, but maybe you could bring up the argument that you need more depth in that situation. Will, you got anything for us from the fourth chair before we play a game here to end things off?
First of all, let's address scoring by quarter, because you guys brought that up. Virginia Tech's been outscored 14-2 in the first quarter and outscored 21-12 in the fourth quarter. They have tied their opponents in the second quarter 34-34. Now, that's interesting. Virginia Tech has 69 points on the year. Half of them have come in the second quarter. And Virginia Tech has won the third quarter 21-7. So third quarters are best, second quarters are second best, and fourth and first are not great. Second thing is, let's revisit Pop Watson. He posted on Twitter this morning at 9:30, and as we record, it's 11:15 right now. Pop says, I want to apologize to my family, team, coaches, and fans of VT football for my immature decision, which led to me being suspended from the team. I take full responsibility for my actions. I made a poor decision, and for that, the game I love has been taken away. I can't promise I will never make another mistake because I'm not a perfect person, but I do promise to make team-first decisions and grow from this experience, so I am not a distraction to this program. I'm highly motivated to get back with my team at some point, and I plan on leading this program back to a championship level through hard work and dedication. Once again, I am sorry, Pop Watson. So thought that was nice and worth reading the full text of. So
yeah, so not a big deal. Just don't get hurt, Kyron.
Don't do it again.
Right.
Also, one more point on their little trivia about the kicker who got sent home. It was Tyler Weiss.
Yes.
I looked it up.
I was going to let it lie, but I had looked it up.
No, it was bothering me. I was looking it up between breaks here. So.
We should have him on the podcast one summer.
Who, Tyler Weiss?
Oh, absolutely.
Is he around here?
I have no idea.
We could bring him in via Zoom.
Yeah, I don't know where he is.
People will be like, "Who's that?"
Tell us about your escapades in New Orleans. What was
it worth it?
Yeah,
Was the juice
I'm sure he'd
worth the
say yes.
squeeze? All right, so let's play some trivia for the 2018 Marshall game because you guys are so good at trivia. I'm sitting here looking at the box score. Now, if you remember, that game was played at the end of the 2018 season because East Carolina had canceled the one game. Virginia Tech was 5-6, and they needed a game to get to bowl eligibility. So they hit up Marshall. I guess Marshall had canceled a game or something like that also. They were available. So the two teams played, and what was the final score?
It's like 35-18 or something like that. Tech won pretty handily, if I remember correctly.
Chris?
38-17.
41-20.
Oh,
Score-wise, Tech won pretty handily, but let me find some interesting stats here. Total yards, 454 to 452, Virginia Tech. Marshall ran for 232 yards and averaged 6.6 yards a carry.
Well, I think Tech allowed about 200 rushing yards per game that year. That was 2018.
Yeah. So the other thing I find interesting is, let me find the stats. Ryan Willis tore it up. He had 312 yards passing.
Wow.
And 4 touchdowns.
that's probably his best game as a Hokie, I would think.
He was 18 of 26, no interceptions, 46-yard touchdown pass to Hezekiah Grimsley, 45-yard touchdown pass to Trey Turner, 7-yard pass to an individual who will remain nameless because I want to ask you another trivia question, and a 32-yard pass to Eric Kuma. So he was slinging it all over the yard.
And Trey Turner caught that pass despite apparently a receiver threatening to.
Yeah.
It's like, if you catch this, I will hit you or something. Like
Right,
He
something,
wanted to lose the game, according
Correct.
to Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, it's
article a
amazing
couple
that he
years
went
ago.
18 of 26.
I
with
still
all
don't know
those.
if I believe that
Yeah,
anecdote
yeah.
necessarily.
Now, what I always heard is the Marshall players weren't a big fan of playing that game because they felt like Marshall just took a very, very small payday just to help Virginia Tech make a bowl game. And the Marshall players were like, "We just finished our season. We don't want to play another game unless it's a bowl game, you know." And they weren't really pleased
Well, it looked
about
like
having
it.
to play.
It looked
that.
like it based on the result that day.
So I know a young man who was an academic advisor or helper to some of the Marshall football players at that time. He was a student at Marshall and was one of their tutors, I guess. And he emailed me ahead of time and he said Marshall is not happy. The players are not happy that they're playing this game. Marshall was 8-3. They had a pretty good team, and they came in, and even though they put up some good statistics, they got smoked. So a couple more trivia questions. Ballpark the attendance. What do you? How many people do you think were at that game?
14,000.
It was like 18, I think. It was worse than spring game
9,000?
because the weather was lousy that day.
Man, you guys
too.
are down on it. The listed attendance is 31,000.
No way.
No
No
chance.
chance. No.
Although it was kind of hard to tell with all the fog,
Yeah.
if you remember.
You
There's
couldn't see all
no
the
chance.
Well, Will and I got indoor club
We were in
seats
a
for that
box,
game.
yeah.
I remember-
So that shows you what kind of demand of tickets.
I remember
there were.
walking to the stadium, and it was not a full parking lot, to say the least. Not ideal tailgating weather, so I can't really blame any Hokies fans for not showing up at that one.
All right, last trivia question for you guys. Who was Virginia Tech's leading rusher that day?
Oh yeah, Jalen Holston.
No, Holston did have like
He
a
broke
40,
off a
he
long
had a
run.
40-yard
like-
touchdown run, yeah.
So
2018 was
Scales.
it Stephen Peoples,
Ding, ding,
Peoples.
ding.
Why did I say Scales?
Stephen Peoples.
I get them mixed up. Martin Scales and Stephen Peoples.
fullback, halfback
Yeah.
types, kind of similar.
Peoples had 14 carries for 78 yards. Holston had 4 carries for 54 yards, including a 40-yard touchdown.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
all right. That's it for my early session. I got more later if you got time for it.
You got more later? All right.
Later.
Sounds good. Well, let's go ahead and play a little bit of a game here called Buy, Sell, or Hold. Now, we don't have to get deep into conversation about each one. I just want to hear you guys buying, selling, or holding. I have to give credit to a podcast that I grew up listening to.
Do I get to play too?
Yeah, you get to
All
play,
right, I'll be
of course. Kind of stealing this from theirs. They talk Syracuse stuff, and I love the idea, and I thought, hey, we got to do this.
First of all, every radio station
Does buy,
podcast
sell, or hold?
has done this before. This is like saying, "Oh, I took this Mount Rushmore idea
Okay.
for this." Like everybody does.
Okay,
This is one
fair.
of the staples of the
Secondly-
industry.
That's the only
do it
place
here.
I've seen it.
Secondly, every TSL podcast has to have a Syracuse mention.
Yeah, you know.
So you know how you've got the always be red shirting sign? We need to make a sign for when Gio mentions Syracuse.
I was the first person to mention Syracuse
That's true.
today. Believe it or not. Yeah.
I just can't
And
wait.
Gio lit up when you.
Oh, yeah.
Sure he did.
Grinning ear to ear. And Will goes to me, don't say anything. I just can't wait till October 26th. Well, that leading up week when we just talk about Syracuse all week here on the pod. That's going to be fantastic. But anyways, buy, sell, or hold. And you guys, you know, you could definitely give a little nugget, but we're going to kind of go speed round here. First and foremost, Kyron Drones starts Saturday in Huntington.
Oh, buy completely.
Buy. Double buy.
Bye.
All right, everybody's buying. All right. Drones passes for 175 or more yards on Saturday.
175. That's a pretty low bar, so buy.
I'll buy. I mean, if he hits that deep one to Daquan Felton last week, he's at 240. So, yeah, I like it. I like his chances.
I'm going to buy. Marshall's got a good defense, but I'm buying.
Okay. All right. Virginia Tech wins 6 games this season.
Sell.
I am selling. I was on the fence between 5 and 7, 6 and 6 preseason, and I haven't seen anything that would push me up on the over on that at this point.
Okay.
Sell. We're all saying the same thing so far, right?
Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Come on.
We need
Let's
some
start some
controversy
debate.
here.
Let's start some debate. The Hokies scored 21 or more on Saturday.
Sell. I got it close to that.
Okay.
I'll hold. They're right in that range.
Okay. That's so I put a good line there.
Yeah, that's about
fair.
where
I forgot that hold.
That's
was an
about
option.
where I would imagine them finishing.
I picked them to score 20.
Okay. Yes.
So did I.
Will?
Yikes. They're going to score 21 or more.
Yeah. Or will they?
I got to buy that. I picked Virginia Tech 27, Marshall 24.
All right. There you go. Then here's the next one. Virginia Tech beats Marshall. We'll go Will first. He said buy.
Well, on this one, I can say hold. I did pick them to win. I thought I was going to be different, and then I saw that Will picked them too.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes you just, I know it's a feel thing with these picks. There's more art than science with it. I think they'll get up for this one.
I would say hold, you know, a lean towards sell, but mostly a hold.
Okay.
I picked Marshall to win 24-20, but I think you can definitely see a path to a Tech victory in this game because of Marshall's inconsistency so far, their inability to stop a mobile quarterback. And you don't, sometimes those emotions of the biggest game you've played at home in 10 years, they can be a positive, but they can be a negative as well. We don't know. I'm not going to waste time guessing the emotions of 18 to 22-year-olds. But I can see a path to victory for Virginia Tech in this game. I can also see a path to another 19-point defeat.
Well, part of when I picked this preseason, I picked this as a loss, and part of my thought was Grant Wells going back into Huntington. That's a tough place. They're going to be off to play a former team into them. That's an emotional game for him. How does he handle that whole thing? And now that's not even probably going to come into fruition this Saturday. I think it'll be drones, and that's sort of removed from the equation. So on paper, you look at this and you go, man, I don't see any reason why Tech will win that game. But sometimes you got to go against the grain with some of these picks.
Here's another line type of question. The Hokies run the ball for 150 or more yards as a team on Saturday.
Sell.
I'll sell. 150 is a big number.
It's a big
I think
number.
they run it. They're not going to get 11 right against Purdue, but I don't think they're going to run for 200 either.
Will?
Sell.
Okay. All right. Virginia Tech wins the turnover battle on Saturday.
Sell.
Hold. I don't even know how you could guess on that one.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's kind of random.
fair.
I'll hold because the Hokies haven't forced a turnover in either of their last 2 games.
No.
Marshall's only turned it over once in each of their last 2 games.
Okay.
So that's a hold.
This one's a little interesting. This is more of a big picture one. And I was trying to dig and see if like RSN was still a thing this year because I feel like every year it's like hanging by a thread. So there's no RSN, correct?
No, the
It's on the
CW. replaced
CW.
that.
The CW. Okay. So I guess I'll reconfigure the question. Virginia Tech plays 3 or more CW games this year.
Sell.
Sell. Okay.
I don't even know how they choose that, really.
Well, it doesn't help when you're not winning usually.
It doesn't. I thought that they wouldn't have been an 8 o'clock game on the ACC network for Pitt.
Can't
either.
believe
so
that,
I don't really know the whole process. Let's just say I don't think there are going to be a lot of marquee games in the
Well, we
TV
already know the
slots this
first
year.
4 games are not on CW. We already know the Syracuse game isn't on the CW.
True.
So that leaves 7 games.
The first 5 games
Yeah,
aren't on
Pitt-
the CW.
Pitt is
because Pitt
also-
is ACC network.
That's right. So
it's 3.
So
I'll say sell. I'm under.
3 of
Chris
the
has
select-
convinced
3
me
of the other 6
with his logic
definite
over
sell.
here.
Yep.
You selling too, Will?
I'm going to sell, but I think it'll be closer than you think. They're going to play Florida State. But there's 6 open games.
Okay.
FSU will be on a major network. I don't know about Wake. At Louisville, at BC could wind up on the CW. NC State, I don't know. At Virginia could wind up on the CW. So it's going to be close.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Let's see. Tech tallies 4 or more sacks as a team on Saturday.
Sell. Marshall hasn't allowed a sack all year.
Yeah,
And-
4 is a huge number.
Right.
Sell.
All right.
Sell.
Okay. Awesome.
And I don't think Marshall will throw it enough to get sacked.
Yeah,
all
that was the
time.
thing. Rutgers, it's like,
they're
maybe they
smart.
can get after the quarterback, and they threw it 16 times, something like that.
All right. Tech holds Marshall to 170 or less passing yards.
Bye.
That's big.
Yeah, I'll buy that one because I think they'll be able to rush the ball, and they won't have to pass it that much.
I'll buy that one as well.
Okay. All right. Then on the contrary to that, Marshall runs the ball for 150 or more yards.
Every team Tech has faced this year has set their season high in rushing yards and yards per carry. I'm going to buy that until that trend changes.
Yeah, Tech's giving up 212 a game.
Yeah.
So I got to buy.
Will?
I'm going to, what was it again?
150 or more. Let's make it fun. 175 or more rushing yards.
I'm going to buy that because even if Tech plays solid defense most of the game, they tend to give up some explosive plays that pile onto the total.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have today, fellas. Your final thoughts on Marshall.
Very, very close game. Like I said, I can see a path to victory. I can also see a path to a 19-point loss. And I think we're going to say that for a bunch of games this year. You can see a path, like most ACC teams outside of Florida State and probably Syracuse right now are kind of the same with just different matchup each week, but kind of the same overall talent level and things like that. So it's going to be one of those years where a lot of the games I think are going to be close.
Interesting game, crucial game. I think it'll be a fun spot to go to. I've never been to Huntington for a game, obviously with the history of Marshall and everybody seeing the movie and everything like that. I'm really curious to go up there and see what this atmosphere is like. And these are the type of games on the schedule that you play, and it's a 1-and-1 maybe. And like, it's not the worst thing in the world to do this. Don't do it for 10 years,
Right.
like ODU. But if it's a one-off thing where you do a 1-and-1 like this, I think it's pretty good.
All right. Fellas, appreciate your time. It's Virginia Tech and Marshall coming up on Saturday. That's a noon kickoff. ESPN 2? ESPN 2 has the coverage for you. For Jack Brizendine behind the scenes, Will Stewart in the 4th chair, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long. We'll see you on Monday when we talk about this thing.